sessions, and one of them is, of course, the award session for the ICS Legacy Award. So my name is Daniel Ricklin. I'm a professor at the University of Basel in Switzerland, and it's my great pleasure to lead this session and to introduce also our awardee for the ICS Legacy Award, which is Professor John Lambris. And so when I was announced that John will get the award, so as a long time collaborator, but also a former mentee and friend of John. So I was thrilled to hear that John will receive the Legacy Award. I was even more touched when I was asked to do the introduction of John for this Legacy Award. I felt humbled, and after all this joy, I suddenly started realizing, so how do you introduce such a larger-than-life figure than John Lambris and do that in 10 to 15 minutes or so? So that's kind of a challenge. And I mean, the other questions I have was then, what actually is a legacy? How do you describe a legacy? So there's many different ways you could describe a legacy. I mean, you could go by the numbers, and even that is, of course, very impressive if you talk about John. If you just look at the metrics of his achievements that he did, of course, up until now and still ongoing, then we're talking about more than 500 papers in peer-reviewed journal, and of course, sometimes even very highly ranked journals, Science, Nature, you name it. John has been publishing in those journals. But then it's also how many times they were cited, how impactful they were. We're looking at the mounting citation range that is almost Olympic, with more than 75,000 citations. Of course, this then amounts to an even more astronomical figure with the age index of more than 40 and an I-10 index of more than 500. So this is, of course, already really impressive if you look at the productivity that John had. It's also that he he was able to acquire more than $50 million in funding, so from different sources, public, private, all these different federal sources that he could tap into with his research, convince the reviewers that they sponsor and support his research. And he received numerous doctorates, so honorary doctorates, so from Germany, from Sweden, you name it, from Greece, of course, that he was also recognized for his great achievements to both research and society. And we also talk about several patents. We're going to hear some of these technology. Many of you know, of course, the Constantin story, but there is even more. So there's more than 30 patents that have been either granted or are pending, and then many more applications, of course, that bring to that. So this is one thing you could assess in a legacy, but I don't think that's really what we talk about. You can also look into what was actually, how many places you conquered, how many positions you held, and also that. John's legacy is, of course, very, very impressive. So he started at this wonderful place in the Greek mountains, and this is probably a picture of his very first bench work that he did back in those days. And he traveled down then to Patras to start his scientific education in biology first, and then in biochemistry. And this sounds now very common that you do a biochemistry, PhD in biochemistry, but back then it was something that is quite new. And you will see this opened many doors to John, because he was really an expert in characterizing proteins. And actually back then, during his work in Patras, he got accustomed and acquainted to some work that he had to isolate, say, 3, and this, of course, stayed a major focus of his research. And importantly, it opened the door to venture his career then also abroad. He was able to join Gordon Ross's group at University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill, was also promoted at a very young age to assistant professor stage, and had published many, many different and very important papers, and then switched to the competition, basically, I guess, back to Europe, when he was joining see that this works. Yeah, now it's going. The group of Manfred Dietrich in Mainz, and after a short stint there, he hopped back again. And I think don't have to introduce this group. We heard also in the Hans Müller-Eberhard Award for Untertenor about this world-famous group of Hans-Müller Eberhard as Scripps Institute, and John was there very active for several years. Then it was back to Europe, and of course this is very close, not only geographically, but to my heart, that he moved to Basel, to then the world-famous Institute of Immunology in Basel. Unfortunately, that's not existing anymore, but it's really a very hot spot of productive research, novel research, innovative research, and John, of course, thrived there. And then he finally moved then again over the pond to Philadelphia at University of Pennsylvania, where he was the captain of his own ship and to get his crew, and was since then active in Philadelphia. He was then at some point also appointed a very prestigious endowed professorship, the Dr. Ralph and Sally Weaver Professorship in Research and Medicine, and this also shows that he was well recognized. And what is maybe now coming really into the legacy part is that in true John manner, it's not only about receiving awards and receiving such honors, but what he did just recently is, together with Rodanti, his wife, to have a foundation, the John Rodanti Lambris Academic Scholarship Foundation, and through those efforts also now have his own endowed professorship that he has someone at the University of Pennsylvania that benefits from his generosity. And this leads into what I think is the legacy, to build things that last, to build things that impact the community. And another example is actually what we are here in this round. The ICW, the International Continent Workshops, is actually quite old, so the first ones are in the mid-50s, but the society, and I didn't know that either, is actually quite young. So it was only founded in 2001 officially, and I heard it was apparently over some Greek wine in Rhodes that it was discussed that we also should come together as a society. And John was one of the founding fathers, and there was others, of course, Mo Daha, and John Atkinson, John Varounakis, and also some of people in here, Andrea, Mike, for example, were there from the very beginning and really built up this community to not only come together during the meetings, but also have really this conglomeration in between. So the very first elected president by members of the community was actually then in 2002, and you can guess who this was, of course. Well, John Lambris, who then in 2003 took the realm as president-elect, and then from 2005 as the president of the ICS, where he influenced, of course, and supported many different programs that we know and love today. But I think the ICW is very important, but what really characterizes John, I think, is the other conference, and there where he's very active and also founded these conferences. I'm sure you'll hear from John much more about the Aegean conferences, and this is, of course, a wonderful platform, a wonderful opportunity to come together to talk about science in a much different setting that we have in the society meetings, if you have ever joined one of those conferences. So this is really great that you have this get-together in Greece and are able to discuss. It's a family business, as many things that John is doing, but not only that, Rodanti and his son Dimitrios are very active in those endeavors, but even more so that John and his family feel us like being part of the family and really can sit together, having a relaxed atmosphere, discuss. Of course, it's not only socializing and not only dancing, which is a very important part of the Aegean conferences, but exactly this socializing, sitting together is what drives also great research, because many connections that still exist today and might have been sparked have a root in these Aegean conferences. But scientifically, I think the true meaning and the true secret of these Aegean conferences is they are very broad. They're not just about concourse, there are complement meetings, but there are also innate immunity meetings and many more that has been enabled by a platform. And John is very meticulous to not only invite scientists from different fields, not only the complement field to these conferences, but also from other clinical industrial areas, even editors that are coming to these conferences. And by that, he creates this complement immersion field that many scientists get acquainted with complements, some of them immunologists, editors, publishers, translational researchers, and great researchers that go into systems biology. So they didn't even know that they were talking and being exposed to complement, but slowly dragging in. Some try to escape, but it's very hard. Some stay in the field, but it really creates this spark, not only for your own research, but there's so many things that have been induced, research projects, but also business deals probably, and then the interest gain for some inhibitors we're presenting. So this is for me, the true meaning of the Aegean conference, to really bring people together to talk about not only your science, but be exposed to many different ideas. And this is, of course, also what John drives in his own research. And this is maybe the interesting thing about John. So complement is both the center of the universe for him, but also the gateway to different galaxies. So pretty much everything that John has done in these more than 500 papers is about complement, but rarely just about complement, but always connecting with different things. Of course, there are more complement-focused studies, such as those about the C3 convertase with Petros, who was receiving the first ICS Legacy Award, and this was really fascinating, but many of the others, so if we talk about animals, so there is pretty much, I don't think any animal from fish and to axolotl regeneration, to pigs and rodents, to monkeys, to humans that he investigated. There is no organ that he was not even involved in looking at complement mechanism, from liver regeneration to synaptic pruning, for example, with Beth Stevens, complement evasion from pathogens and ocular diseases, from preclinical to translational to clinical. So John was really broadly involved in many different things. So I couldn't even start looking at different individual papers, but I just want to show you one because it has been mentioned by Ruben also during the cancer session, which was this seminal paper in Nature Immunology about the different roles that complement can have in cancer modulation. And of course, it was not the first time complement and cancer were linked. We have been knowing that there is dysregulation and complement has a role in cancer, but this paper was really seminal in investigating this differential role it can have, some positive, some negative roles. And this was really a seminal breakthrough. And I'd also show this if you're a young researcher here in the audience who submitted an abstract and you haven't been selected for oral presentation, so don't worry, that doesn't mean that your research is not impactful. So in 2008, in the Basel conference, he was only selected as a poster, and as a lone resident of the Lambris lab who was traveling to Basel, I was then instructed to just hang the proofs of the Nature Immunology paper there instead of a poster. So this is still hope. So it doesn't mean that you haven't been really impactful research. So this was a bit about the research itself, but also in terms of technology. John has always been a pioneer. And if you look at monoclonal antibodies, we take them for granted now, but of course they only have been enabled in the 1970s, and the first therapeutic antibody had only been introduced in the mid-1980s. And actually shortly after, John published, together with Brigitte Stockinger, a really important paper describing one of the first blocking monoclonal antibodies against C5. In the paper, title was not so much about therapeutics, more about diagnostics, but clearly describing it as a blocking antibody. And there's some discussions how much this antibody influenced the development of Solarius and everything that came after. But what you can see here is that the very first paper that Alexion published about the proof of concept in arthritis to ameliorate complement in a mouse model, they used BB51, this antibody, for their proof of concept studies. Another technology that John pioneered and introduced to the field was phage display peptide libraries, was described in the 1990s. And then also in 1996, together with Arvind Sahu, he published this famous paper about comstatin, the C3 inhibitor. And this, of course, was very important. And this led, on one hand, to a licensing out to Apellis or Potentia previously. It is now, and this I think many envy that, there's not a lot of chances to bring your compound into the clinic, but we now have comstatin, of course, in the clinic for 2 indications, for AMD and for PNH. But I come to that just in a minute. He still thought there might be more to do with the technology and founded his own company, Amitos. But I think what's important, even more important for most of us, that he's extremely generous in giving out these compounds, these reagents. I think many of us will have received reaction from John, not sure how many hundreds or thousands he sent around the world. So really showing his generosity of sharing with the community. And even his impact on developing drugs has been quite unusual and very community-driven. Of course, as I just mentioned, it was discovered Comstat in his lab in 1996, or published at least back then. And then one of these versions has been licensed out after some improvement. And then, but still, as I mentioned, he was really keen on improving on the technology from an academic side, understanding what he's doing, and also he wasn't that quite happy that he lost control, how much he could share with the community and how it was flowing back. And this was one of the reasons why he founded Mindas and had this second, third, fourth generation Comstat being developed. And the development was indeed so. Of course, he was looking around venture capitalists, but soon learned that it was losing control. They would like to steer it in a direction that might not benefit the field, that might not be that appropriate. So he really tried to have as much public funding for the development and also collaborate with many of our clinical colleagues in testing Comstat in many different models. So if you look only the ones that feature Comstat, when you look in PubMed, that is way over 200, and of course there's even more if you would look at the fine print of many of these that use them as a control, for example. And there is many more things that he did to preclinical inhibitors, experimental inhibitors that are very, very interesting. So, but just don't take it from me. Let's look what one of these persons who benefited from the technology is talking about in an interview that he gave a few years ago. Not sure if you're gonna hear the sound or.
It was discovered by a phenomenal Greek scientist called John Lambris, and you've rarely seen a field in science that is so, where there's a godfather. He was the godfather, so I went to the University of Pennsylvania and knocked on the godfather's door, and I was very lucky. I mean, we got along very well, and he gave us the privilege of moving his baby literally forward in clinical trials, and it turned out really great. I mean,
so did I mention that the election of the first president was done in Palermo? So okay. So which brings me to kind of one of the last part of my presentation is the mentoring, and then. John is just a wonderful mentor. I think I'm probably the one expert in this field because I've stayed with John for the longest time, and I really benefited tremendously. So he taught me so many things that are beyond science. He taught me about to climb up and try to reach new heights, to think outside the box, to go up and try to find new endeavors, new connections. But also he taught me about when to fight, when to cut your losses, when to negotiate, sometimes the Swiss style, sometimes the Mediterranean style. So it was really a lot that I learned in daily business. And I think this approach, what I told you about complement and his connection and thinking outside the box, it was a bit similar with science in general. So research was always at the center of everything, but not just the only thing, was always open, connected, and always in a different and very open context. So if you ever stroll with John around the Italian market in Philadelphia, and before buying or ordering a goat for Eastern, Greek Eastern, talking about the grant application, and then sitting down in an Italian cafe and having a cannoli and talking about some paper revisions that we have to do. So this is really what put a lot of thrive into these efforts. So there's similar lessons that I learned. Of course, you need to have great research skill, and you learned that very well in John's lab. But there is also, you should have an application focus. So really what you do, what it is for. Of course, bold ideas I mentioned, just don't stay put, but think ahead. Lifelong learning is a very important part of what you're doing. You have not only to be inspired, but also inspire others. And similarly, you have to do that in a way that is not just about science, but really enclose it and socialize and discuss and have open ideas. And finally, mentorship is not something you only receive, but you also give, and therefore also involving very early in mentoring others. And I call this the Lambris principle. So if you can take some of these ideas to your mentorship, I think that you're on a very good path. So mentoring inside was very important. Of course, it forged kind of connections that went even beyond then staying in John's lab, and even then after, if you have a very good relationship with John and we meet regularly and sometimes invited to Greece and discuss, so it's really, really a long-lasting mentorship and collaboration and friendship engagement. But this is not just restricted to in-house persons, so he was always important for John to also foster young scientists, but not outside his lab. So also when we organized the ICW in Crete, for example, it was very important to have young scientists as chair. He introduced or pushed to introduce the Early Career Award, for example, and also in his Aegean conference, of course, there's a lot of travel awards enabling young scientists to join the meeting. And we're going to hear tomorrow about another thing that he introduced, the Lambris Training Award, and Marco will receive that tomorrow, so I don't talk too much about it, but several researchers before Marco also have benefited from that. So coming to the conclusion, you see here what is the criteria that the ICS is talk about with the Legacy Award, someone who made a big impact to the field, has long-standing endeavors in the area, brings the field forward, and also mentors students. So I think John ticks all of these boxes, but again, for me, the most important thing is what you what you introduce to the field that has a broader impact for the community, and John did, of course, also tremendously on that. But don't take it from me for the last minute. Let's tune into Greek TV. Because, of course, John is also famous in Greece and has in a talk show. And let's see what others are talking about John in the
Είμαι επίκουρος καθηγητής έρευνας στο Πανεπιστήμιο της Πενσιλβάνιας και είμαι τυχερός που γνωρίζω τον Γιάννη τόσο ως επιστήμονα αλλά κυρίως ως μέντορα. Ήρθα στο εργαστήριο του Γιάννη στη Φιλαδέλφια το καλοκαίρι του 2006 από την Ελβετία ως μεταδιδακτορικός ερευνητής και συμμετείχα σε πολλές μελέτες σχετικές με τις λειτουργίες του συμπληρώματος, τη συμμετοχή του στις ασθένειες και βέβαια με την έρευνα σχετικών με το συμπληρώματο.
Why he's staring into the void, but what I think he is saying was just a big thank you, John, for the many things you have done, for thinking outside the box and advancing the field, for bringing people together to do great science and great research, for supporting the community and also for great mentorship, not only for me, but also for many others, and for really leaving already a legacy in the field with many more things to come. So a big thank you and congratulations, and with that, John, please come to the stage.